LinkedIn News.
Hey there, it's Leah. I'm excited to share an episode with you from the Vault today that I think is especially relevant: defining your values. I want to start with why this matters now. We seem to be in a period of a ton of change and even more uncertainty. Now, I imagine you're probably feeling it in your everyday life and at a more societal level. I certainly do. And if I'm honest, I feel like I'm a little too plugged in to the world right now, to social media, to the news, to everything that's going on. And I'm a little too unplugged from myself. And while I'm not a proponent of being unaware of what's going on in the world, I do believe that a solid foundation and a solid practice that helps you return to that foundation can support the way that you show up every single day, at work, in your community, at home, and in how you take in all of this information that's quite overwhelming. So today, we're going to get clear on what matters most to you, your core values. I'm going to walk you through exactly what they are, because if we're honest, I think that core values can sound a little vague or abstract or even hokey. And then I want to take you to the fun part. We're going to do an exercise so you can identify what yours are. If you do the exercise, I'd love to hear how you use your core values on a daily basis. So write a LinkedIn post and tag me so I can celebrate you. All of that's coming up after a short break. But real quick, before we start, a reminder that our team is taking some time to get a bit more intentional about what we bring you in 2026. So through the end of the year, we're going bi-weekly. Our next episode will be on December 2nd, and it's one I am really excited to share about finding your calling and taking the first steps toward it. I think it actually pairs really nicely with today's core values episode, so I do hope you'll stick around. Enjoy. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, this is Everyday Better, a show about the tools you need to create positive change in your mindset, your work, and every other area of your life. I'm Leah Smart, LinkedIn senior editor and a certified professional coach, and I help people become better versions of themselves one day at a time. Every week, I sit down with a trusted voice, so together we can explore how to take small steps toward big changes, the kind we plan for, strive toward, or never saw coming. I want to start by sharing a bit about a developmental psychologist named Robert Kegan. His work revolves around adult development, but really it's kind of about how we can reach our fullest potential. Robert Kegan developed a theory about how our minds change as we develop. We start as children with these wildly impulsive little minds, and as our cognitive and emotional abilities shift and grow over time, we move into new stages. Now, in Kegan's theory, there are 5 stages of adult development, but not everyone reaches all of them, and that's not necessarily a problem. In fact, he says the majority of the adult population actually exists in the 3rd stage, which is called the socialized mind. In this stage, we tend to seek out external direction. So we look around us to figure out what's expected of us, what we should value most, and how we should behave. If you compare that to the stage that can come after, which is called the self-authoring mind, this one is a little bit different. It's where people align closely to internal values they've defined by themselves. They create some distance between them and the expectations and values that are passed down through their culture, whatever that may be. Now, I would bet most of us wouldn't mind being in that later category, that self-authoring mind. A lot of us would love to be guided by our internal sense of direction instead of feeling like we're at the whim of external pressures or what people think we're supposed to do. So what causes us to move from the socialized mind to the self-authoring mind? Kegan notes that for many people, this happens when there is some seismic shift in their lives, an inciting incident that could be voluntary or involuntary, something like a new relationship, a wedding, a divorce, infidelity, loss of a job, or deciding to quit a job. Something happens that forces you to see that following the prescribed path, that socialized mind stage, is no longer going to work for you. And I use the word forced intentionally because it's not necessarily a pleasant experience. It's a lot harder to make your own way than to follow the way of others or the way of your society. Most of us don't want to be outliers. But once this shift happens, we have to reevaluate. We have to ask ourselves, If living by someone else's values isn't working, then what values should I live by? And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed. She says, "This life is mine alone, so I have stopped asking people for directions to places they've never been." And this is why clarifying and defining your personal values is such an important tool in personal development. Most people come to this work because they see an opportunity for change. They've maybe figured out that they have a limiting belief that's getting in the way of what they want. Or maybe they're struggling to figure out what they want in the first place. Either way, they have realized that something is holding them back and they need to figure out what's next. I know personally this was the case for me when I first started this work. And my inciting incident was about the direction of my career. I want to go back to my late 20s when I had just been offered a huge career opportunity, the chance to move to Chicago and grow a program at LinkedIn that I was managing in San Francisco at the time. This would have been one of those opportunities to really climb the corporate ladder, which is something that I had been wanting to do. I'd wanted to see this level of success for a while. But for some reason, when I got that offer, and I can still remember the feeling, I had this guttural feeling of reluctance. People would ask me if I was excited, and I couldn't even force a smile about that offer. But I also didn't want to admit to myself that it wasn't right. Now, sometimes this happens, and it doesn't mean that it's definitely the wrong path for you, right? It might just be an expression of fear or self-doubt, and once you push yourself through, you'll start to thrive. But this sort of feeling is data that you should pay attention to either way. And for me, I realized that the tension I felt was actually around my values. I think I knew deep down that this job wasn't aligned with what I really wanted for my life, for my career, or who I wanted to be. And it didn't give me a sense of meaning. But I cared about what my managers, peers, and friends thought of me. And I wanted to have a good image. I wanted to be seen as successful and reliable. So I said yes. But then, a few months before I was supposed to move, I traveled to Chicago one last time for a work event. And in the middle of the night, it was wild, I shot up in my hotel room bed, and everything in me was screaming, "You cannot do this. This isn't right." I had this life-altering realization that I didn't want to climb this ladder. I didn't want to do what everyone else thought I should be doing in order to look successful. And weirdly, I somehow felt freaked out, of course. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was also so relieved. I felt relieved that I had clarity, but also I didn't know what this meant for me. So I had a choice. It's one I think a lot of us will relate to. I could either ignore this feeling, or I could start my career over again, or at least it felt like that. Either option was pretty scary. And so in this big decision, what did I have to guide me? If I listened to everybody around me, if I followed everyone else's vision of success, of what I should do, I would have probably ignored that feeling. But instead, I realized that I didn't want to define my life by what everyone else was telling me to do. This was a moment that I could make a different decision. And I think a lot of us, though, blindly accept the values that have been passed down to us. Every culture, of course, has different ones. You might say in the United States, where I live, our core values are around independence, self-reliance, directness, honesty, success. Now, I think having cultural values passed down to us can be really beautiful. But having our values come from an external source only can lead to inner conflict when life gets messy, when things go off course, and your inner voice is screaming at you in a hotel room telling you something's wrong. You have to get off this path. In those moments, you need something more personal and intentional to ground you. Now, getting clear on your values can give you time before you make a choice. In my story, I didn't have those, and I just took the offer without taking a look at what I believed and what mattered to me. So I want you to think about how powerful it can be to get grounded in what matters most to you. Now, making decisions with your values in mind won't always lead to a perfect outcome, but it will help you make more authentic choices. Following my gut led me back to New York City, which is where I live now. And it's where I first took my coaching course, where I did an exercise specifically around defining my values. It led me to take a huge career leap that involved a big pay cut and was honestly really confusing for people around me. Whenever I felt that pressure or that judgment from other people, I kept returning to this one big question. What am I optimizing for now? I had to realize I'm not optimizing for a career climb right now. I'm not optimizing for money. I'm optimizing for what matters most to me in this moment, which is a different, more fulfilling path forward when it came to the work I did. Okay, so all this sounds great, right? But how do you actually go about figuring out what your values are? Well, last year I had personal growth educator Amanda Hilton on the show, and she walked me through her favorite exercise for getting specific about your values. After the break, we'll work through it together. We'll be back in just a few moments. Before the break, we talked about the importance of defining values. I really love my conversation with Amanda Hilton, who is a personal growth educator. Now, before we dive into the exercise, I want to play a little bit of our conversation for you so you can hear how she thinks about the usefulness of core values. Here's Amanda.
On the most basic level, our core values are the things that are most fundamentally important to us. So for many of us, for most of our lives, our core values, we have some sense of what they are, but they're kind of operating on this subconscious level, which, because we haven't taken the time to give language to them, they can also be hard to actually use. And it can leave us susceptible to other influences, whether it is ideas that we grew up with from our family coming in, or someone else's opinion, or all the marketing that we're constantly subjected to, influencing what we want, what we think we want. I think that often when we're not operating out of our core values, and when I say not operating out of our core values, I think that most of us are trying to do the right thing, quote unquote, the right thing, trying to do what we think is best for us, but we don't really tangibly know what that means. So it might look like being on autopilot, kind of drifting through life, not really sure why you're doing what you're doing. You kind of know why you're making the choices you're making. You kind of know why you're picking the goals that you have, but when it really comes down to it, you don't feel connected to that in an intimate way on a day-to-day level. So it can look like just drifting, but it can look like just all this added friction. You're trying to do what's right for you, but it feels hard. It feels so hard to know what that even means. So I think that the value in taking the time to get really clear, uncover what your values are, and give language to them is that they suddenly become usable. You can actually start harnessing them, leveraging them to help you make decisions, to feel more meaning in your day.
And so, okay, so let's just say we're like ready to do that. What prompts are the best prompts to start defining these values? Because I know I've also heard you say, and I've seen this a million times, where it's like there's a list and there's like honesty. And it's like, yes, honesty is a value for most of us.
Yes.
We would assume, right? For
Yes.
many of us that it's a value.
Yes.
That then has kind of no value. It's almost obvious. So how do we start really defining this for ourselves?
Yeah, that's such a good point, because I do think there's these things that we think, oh, if I don't put that as one of my top values, it means that I don't value honesty. It means that I don't want other people around me to be honest.
Correct. Not
to
true.
your point, is not true. So I think that's why there's value in not just having this vague sense of what's important to you, but actually taking the time to define it. So like you said, oftentimes what you'll see recommended online, and I think this is a great starting place, is they have, you can Google it, there are probably hundreds out there, but these compiled lists of values, and there might be 100, 150, 200 values on there, things like honesty, kindness, integrity, family, adventure. And what you can do is you can print out one of those lists and go through them and start to cull it down. So start to circle the things that feel like they're really calling to you. When you hear that word, you're like, ooh, yeah, that's like particularly important to me. Not that honesty isn't,
right,
but this one is like particularly central to what I want and who I am and what I believe. And so you can start there with one of those big lists. But I find that when most people stop there, they're still left unsure about, okay, now I have, this circled list of maybe 20 or 30 different values, but what do I actually do with this? Like, how do I actually move forward with this? How is this useful?
So I love Amanda's point on this. If you go search values on Pinterest or Google, you will find these huge lists of dozens and dozens of different values. Now, I have one that I'm using today from Brené Brown, and I'll link it in the episode show notes if you want to follow along with mine. But following Amanda's advice, I went through and circled the values that jumped out at me. And here they are: achievement, ambition, commitment, community, confidence, connection, contentment, and curiosity. And I'm going to stop right there because even in just the first column out of 4, I've already circled 8 values. Like Amanda said, if you just left it at that, it would make your head spin. So let's listen to her advice on how to get even more specific.
I always recommend, after you go through and circle the different values, to just get a sense of some of the language and to remind yourself of the different avenues that might open up for you here. To go through a list of prompts, questions, and a lot of people will do this in a journal, but if journaling's not your thing, you can also talk to a partner about it.
Whatever.
iPhone notes. One of my favorites is pressing record on the voice recorder on your phone and just speaking it out.
Yeah.
Just talk. So you can do it in whatever way works best for you. But to start to think about a few things, and I'll share a few questions that people might start with. One being, this one's one of my favorites. When do I feel most like myself? And it's kind of an odd question if you've never thought about it before, but when do you feel most like you? What are you doing when you feel most like yourself? When it's easiest for you to just feel like the person that you are. So for me, when I have a Sunday and I have nothing to do, I don't have to leave the house, I can make a cup of coffee or tea and sit down with my 20 different half-started projects and hobbies.
Sounds very familiar.
That is me. That is when I feel most like myself. And so just sit with this question, play with it. These can be light and fun, and start to notice, what values do you see emerging when you think about that? Another one could be if you had no constraints. So no financial constraints, no time constraints. You could do whatever you want. What would you be doing? What would you want to be doing? Who do you admire and why? What values do they seem to live according to? What have been your peak experiences over the last 5 years or so? When you think back to what was most meaningful to you in the last 5 years, what was it? What were you doing? Who were you with? What values might have been at play there? And then another really big one is when you think back to feeling angry or frustrated, or a pet peeve was being triggered in some way. When you think back to recent experiences of that, what was going on? What value or values were being suppressed? What values were being ignored? What is that moment, that experience revealing to you about what is most important to you? That can often be a really good window in, is when we feel frustrated, what is going on there? And the reason why these questions are so valuable, beyond just circling things that feel right on the list, the reason why these questions can be so clarifying is because two people can have the same exact answer to one of these questions, but what's revealing is in the reason why. So if you're thinking of that last question with what's made you frustrated recently, and you have some experience with your boss saying something or doing something, it could be the same exact situation or very similar, but one person will come out of that and realize that the value that was being rubbed up against was compassion. That is something that is so central to them, and it didn't feel right to them when that value of compassion was not being honored by the other person. Another person will come out of the same experience and say, that also rubbed me the wrong way, but the thing that was really central here was self-expression. I was stifling myself. I was not speaking my mind. I didn't feel free to be able to share what was going on for me. And so these questions can be really clarifying to dig down below the surface a little bit more.
Ooh, I love these questions. That one about moments of anger or a pet peeve is really easy for me, especially living in New York City. I cannot stand when I am walking down the street and people are standing there taking up the entire sidewalk to be on their phone or talking with friends, and then they don't acknowledge other people's presence that need to get by them. It's one of those little things that really just irks me. The surface way to look at it is that I really don't like when people don't have spatial awareness, but that's not actually what bugs me about it. For me, it's a little deeper. It feels like it's rude and disrespectful, and it's a lack of seeing other people's humanity or needs. So thinking about this question helps me clearly see that in this long list of values I've circled, respect is one that truly is important to me. Okay, now that I've got that off my chest, let's focus on a more positive experience. I love Amanda's questions about when we most feel like ourselves. For me, that answer is pretty easy. You've probably heard a lot about my morning routine. This time of day is really important to me, especially on weekends when I really have the time to wake up early, get the exercise I want, meditate, go on a long walk with my dogs, journal, and think about what I want to do for the rest of the day. And hopefully my day involves some sort of quality time with the people I love. But ultimately, what's so important to me about my morning routine is that it's time when I'm not frantically running from place to place. I'm getting a moment to intentionally get grounded in the things that fill my cup so I can be my best self later on. Okay, so what values are present in this experience? The ones that jump out at me from my long list, and you probably will have a long list too, are adventure, balance, commitment, community, connection, contentment, curiosity, faith, freedom, growth, harmony, intuition, kindness, personal fulfillment, respect, simplicity, spirituality, tradition, vision, and wholeheartedness. We still got a lot going on, right? So let's hear more from Amanda on where we go from here.
So after you circle, you get some language ideas, you've jotted down these various answers, maybe you've lived in them and added to your journal. The next step of the process is to look at everything that you have and start to notice any themes and threads. And what I found with everyone who I've done this process with is that when they look at everything that they have, they typically are able to begin to group them into 5 to 10 central ideas that are coming up. And notice, well, maybe I had one answer was really around originality. Like that felt like something that's really valuable to me. And as I was answering this journal prompt, the thing that was coming up was creativity. Well, maybe those two belong together. Or maybe honesty was something that I circled initially, but as I have sat with it and answered these other questions, I can see that honesty, while yes, important to me, perhaps it belongs under the umbrella of integrity. And that's the thing that is central and core to me. So you go through your different value groupings and you choose one word that feels like it really encapsulates the core, the root, the central theme of why all of these different words and bullet points are important to you. And many people have described this process when you land on the name of the value that just feels right. You can, there's something within you. You feel this sense of harmony, this sense of everything just comes together. It just feels like, oh, yes, that's the right word for me. And then you can look at each of your 5 to 8 values and come up with some sort of statement, some sort of description, a couple of additional words, maybe a sentence that demonstrates what that value means to you specifically.
Now, Amanda here is talking about making groups from your pared down list of values. But sticking with the example of my morning routine, I want to see if there's a central theme among those values that I can identify. So I went through my laundry list of values I circled for that experience and picked the ones that felt most right for me. And those were contentment, intuition, kindness, optimism, tradition, vision, and wholeheartedness. So what do these have in common? For me, there's something about all of these words that feel really warm. There's like a sense of wholeness and connection. They sort of feel bright and airy, but also they're grounded in some way. And I know that sounds like a lot of different adjectives because it's pretty hard to describe. But I think why these values feel so important to me is because they're all things that are kind of my baseline for being my best self. When I practice these values, I know I can accomplish what I need to accomplish. I know I'm going to feel good, and I'm going to be being the kind of person I want to be. When I'm not doing these things, I feel really far away from myself. If I'm too stressed or anxious to be kind or optimistic or to feel wholehearted, I don't feel good and I don't do my best work. So having a slow and intentional routine helps me be that person I want to be. And doing this work, really digging into what values are present in something important for me, helps me clarify why. For me, all of these values I just listed to you feel like table stakes. I feel like I'm setting the table for how I want to live. So as Amanda instructs us to do, I'm going to name this group. Now, I want to say something about naming. Again, it has to feel like you. So I'm just going to throw out words that may not make sense to anyone else, and it doesn't really matter. It's just about how you can find a way to label this group in a way that feels authentic to you and that can easily bring you back to these values when you're feeling lost. Now, you don't have to have the perfect name yet, but here are some ideas I came up with for mine. Bricklaying, warm rituals, setting the table, and grounded table stakes. I could spend hours and hours on this exercise. And by the way, I actually recommend that you do because Amanda has so many brilliant questions. And getting super specific about not just what your core values are, but what they specifically mean to you will help you be able to use this list in a tangible way. And if you know me, I'm all about the ways in which you can take action and use things that actually matter in the real world. Now, your list of values is something you can rely on when you come to your next big decision or when you're feeling stuck. I want to say it does take a little bit of time to practice these and embody these. So a bit of advice from me, keep them close and come back to them often. When I first wrote mine, I kept them on my computer monitor just as a reminder. If you want to hear more about how Amanda uses her core values in decision-making, I recommend you listen to our full conversation, and I'll put a link in the show notes as well. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Grace Rubin and Emily Reeves, with help from Ava Ahmad-Begi and Rachel Wong. Asaf Gadron is our sound engineer. Tim Boland mixed our show. We get additional support from Alex Kuznetsova and Ali McPherson. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Maya Pope-Chappelle is director of content and audience development. Courtney Koop is head of original programming. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn and vice president of content development. And I'm Leah Smart. Thanks for coming with me, and I'll see you next time.